Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and welcome to this Thursday afternoon edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Make sure you check them out online at TuscaloosaToyota.com. Glad to be with you during a very busy week of Alabama athletics, both on the diamond, on the hardwood, gymnastics, everything going on right now at the moment. So let's begin the show by, first of all, taking a look at today's headlines. And our headlines are always presented by our friends at RJ Young. They provided us with the smart board to go through all the different headlines today. RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. First of all, let's take a look at what's coming up on the show today, as we will have Coach's Checklist. Head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nate Oats, talking about the men's basketball team gearing up for the SEC tournament coming up later tonight. Alabama's first game against Vanderbilt. We'll be talking about that, plus just kind of where things stand for Alabama men's basketball with our color analyst, Bryan Passink. He'll give us a recap of the regular season, plus preview what's ahead in the postseason. Then we'll be talking softball the rest of the way. We'll have some booth cam highlights from softball, as Alabama had a perfect weekend at the T-Mobile Crimson Classic. Tom Canterbury will have all the booth cam highlights, and then he and Robertson will talk all things Alabama softball, as the Crimson Tide are 20-0 and now gearing up for the start of SEC play. Taking a look at Crimson Tide men's basketball again, play will begin tonight in the 2022 SEC tournament down in Tampa, Florida, 7 p.m. Central against Vanderbilt, as we try to see if Alabama can pick up another win against Commodores. It was a tight game just a couple weeks ago in Nashville. Alabama, number 6 seed in the tournament, of course, the defending tournament champion as well as the regular season champions from a year ago in the SEC. Auburn claimed the regular season title this year, the number 1 seed, but Alabama part of a really strong group, as we'll talk about with Bryan coming up in a few minutes. Just the top of the SEC, as strong as it's been in a long time. We also saw some great honors come in for the Crimson Tide from the Southeastern Conference. Jaden Shackleford was named the All-SEC second team, and then you have on the All-Freshman team Charles Bediako and J.D. Davison, and how about Keon Ellis named the defensive team for the great work he's done this year for the Crimson Tide. Take a look at some other headlines. Let's go next to softball, as again, we'll be talking some Crimson Tide softball a little bit later in the show. But last weekend, a 4-0 weekend at the T-Mobile Crimson Classic. Great wins against Texas and Miami of Ohio. We thought the Crimson Tide would play on Monday against Eastern Illinois, but that was canceled due to some inclement weather. And now this weekend, 20th ranked LSU is the opponent Friday through Sunday. A couple of night games on Friday and Saturday before the Sunday afternoon finale, as the Crimson Tide off to a 20-0 start, ranked second in the nation, just behind Oklahoma, and doing some really nice things this season. Continuing with the headlines, how about the Crimson Tide baseball team? Last weekend at home, a very good weekend for the Crimson Tide. A sweep against Murray State. A couple of games are close. Eric Fago had a big home run on Sunday. That was the difference, as Alabama got the sweep against Murray State. Tuesday's game was postponed due to inclement weather against Middle Tennessee. And then yesterday, a tough one for the Crimson Tide, falling to North Alabama 9-5. We saw Owen Diodati, Jim Jarvis, Zane Denton all power out home runs for the Crimson Tide, but got behind early 5-0, and it was too much to overcome against the Lions. Now this weekend, Brad Bohannon's team will really try and bounce back against Binghamton, and this is the last weekend series of non-conference play for Alabama in just over a week. Florida Gators will be in town to begin SEC play. So Friday at 6, Saturday at 2, Sunday at 1, radio coverage for all of those games available across the network. And we'll finish up with some Crimson Tide athletics headlines from all around Alabama athletics, starting with women's golf. The Valspar Augusta Invitational is coming up this week. If you missed it earlier in the week on Hey Coach, presented by Alpha Insurance, the first half of the show we talked golf with the head women's golf coach Mick Potter, so great conversation with him. You can check out here on our Facebook page. Then on swimming and diving, we keep seeing more honors roll in, more swimmers and divers qualifying for the NCAA championships, so preparations continue. More details available at rolltide.com. Gymnastics team, very busy last weekend. A win against Arkansas on Friday night, and then picked up a quad meet win at Elevate the Stage in Huntsville on Sunday. Now they're gearing up for the SEC championships in just over a week in Birmingham. Then it's going to be very busy on Sunday. We certainly hope that Alabama men's basketball is playing in the championship game of the SEC tournament, but regardless, it'll be a big day coming up for the Tide men's team and the women's team. You have Selection Sunday for both those teams coming up, as we'll get to learn whether or not what seed Alabama is going to be in the men's tournament. The big question with the women's team is, can they make it to the NCAA tournament, or is it possible that Alabama will be going to the women's NITs? A few of the unanswered questions we still have here at this point of the year. Nate Oats talked about his basketball team early in the week before the team left Tuscaloosa to go down to Tampa, Florida for the start of the SEC tournament. Here's Coach's Checklist. 3 big things you need to know from Alabama head coach Nate Oats.
We've played well against the teams we're going to have to play against. Some of them we haven't played well. You know, right now it's about who's playing the best basketball this week. I feel like some of our guys are starting to come around and play the best basketball. I think Quinley's shooting 45% from 3 over the last 5 games. He looked great in practice today. He won the SEC tournament MVP last year. He's coming around right at the right time, in my opinion. You know, obviously Shaq struggled to shoot the ball. I don't think he's going to struggle again. Usually, if he's got a bad game, he bounces back great in the next game. So I feel pretty confident about him. You know, our turnovers have been an issue. We've got to get those fixed. That's the biggest problem right now, is our turnovers, and then obviously our defense we got to continue to work on. But we've definitely got a team capable of running off 4 in a row. We just saw it on the women's side with, I believe Kentucky was a 7 seed, won 4 in a row, and you know, had a big upset and, you know, won the tournament. So, you know, and there's been teams in the past that have won 4 in a row on the men's side, and shoot, I think Auburn did it the year before I got here. So it's definitely doable. You know, we playing better basketball. So it was a disappointing week last week, but I thought our guys played a lot harder on Saturday. You know, our turnovers ended up killing us, and need to make a few more shots and get a couple stops there late. But you know, I was pretty pleased with the effort overall, because I thought, you know, we did show a lot of poise. We're down 15 in the second half, Tennessee, and had to poise to hang in there, get some stops, score some buckets. Got out of the semifinal. Ended up in a tight game against LSU. Kept it together. Herb scored the big bucket. We got to stop late. So, kind of to recapture, you know, I think we got to pay attention to a bunch of little details and just trust the process. That, you know, if we continue to get stops, and again, our defense has to get better. It's a lot easier to be poised on offense when you can trust your defense, like we were able to last year, because you don't put nearly as much stress on your offense and just execute, get a good shot, and know that you're going to get a stop on the other end. So I think the better our defense would get, you know, the more confidence we have in it, the more we're able to show a little poise on the other end of the floor, to be honest with you. It's been inconsistent is what it's been. It's, you know, last game we had 16 steals, or, you know, LSU had 16 steals, so there's 16 live ball turnovers. Some other games, you know, charges, travels, step out of bounds, been more of the dead ball ones, which those are a lot easier to defend. Like, they scored 23 points off our 21 turnovers. You know, that's over a fourth of their points. It's our offense isn't giving our defense a chance. This, you know, there's a lot of synergy in basketball between your offense and your defense. You get a good offensive possession, even if you miss a shot's up on the rim, and your floor's balanced, and you get your transition D set. That means your defense is now set, which makes it a lot easier. You get a stop, you're playing downhill with pace in transition on offense, which we're better doing. It's easier to score, and there's kind of start a whole circular deal going. Well, when you're turning the ball over and they're scoring layups, then their defense is set again, and it makes it harder on your offense, makes it impossible on your defense. We've had an issue. So, you know, we've got to clean them up. I mean, you can't have guys that are not primary ball handlers turning the ball over as much as they are. We can't have our primary ball handlers turning it over as much as they are either. You know, a team as guard-oriented and as skilled as we are should be getting more like 12 turnovers, not double that, which we've been close to at times here. So that's, you know, and we've looked at everything. We looked at all of them. There's not a ton of consistency, to be honest with you. A lot of them are, you know, I'll say this, a lot of them we're not getting the ball out of our hands quick enough on some reads. Teams are collapsing. LSU's a heavy collapse team. We showed multiple clips to our guys where there's 5 guys in the paint, and they're still trying to drive it through, you know, single gaps and getting stripped. Like, we got to get it out of our hands a little earlier, get it moving. Some of them I don't have an answer for. When we just threw the ball to the other team without being aggressive at all. It's just, if you're a high major Division I basketball player, you know, you're not supposed to be doing that. So some of them we have to get our guys playing more aggressive, and then we got to get them to be eager passers, get the ball out of their hands a little quicker.
Some comments from earlier in the week from Crimson Tide head coach Nate Oats as Alabama prepares for tonight's ball game against Vanderbilt in the second round of the SEC tournament. Alabama starting its run in a tournament which it won last year in Nashville. Now this year, the tournament being held in sunny Tampa, Florida, and that's where we'll go next as we visit with our color analyst on all Crimson Tide Sports Network men's basketball broadcast, Bryan Passink, as we take a look back at the regular season plus what's ahead in the postseason starting tonight for the Crimson Tide. Direct from Tampa, Florida, where Bryan, it's time for Alabama to start this run in the SEC tournament. How's everything going?
So far, so good. Life is good in Tampa. The weather's great. Looking forward to getting this thing started. Always such a fun time of year. I mean, as a basketball player or fan, or, this is what you play for. It's March. Alabama's in a great position to hopefully make a run in the SEC and NCAA tournament. But just a lot of excitement around town and a lot of excitement about this tournament coming up.
Sometimes you go into the conference tournament wanting to hit the reset button, and Alabama coming off a couple of tough losses, probably in that shape. Sometimes you don't want to hit a reset button. You want to keep the momentum going from the regular season. But just with the way the week ended for Alabama against Texas A&M and LSU, how do you feel about this group heading into the tournament?
Well, I feel a whole lot better after the LSU game than I did the Texas A&M game. I thought, even though it was a disappointing result, I didn't think it was at all a disappointing performance against LSU. That wasn't the case against Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M, to their credit, they've turned themselves into a bubble team, and they're one of the hotter teams in the SEC, and they played an incredible game in Tuscaloosa, shot it very well, and defended at a high level, which is typically what Buzz Williams teams do. But after that game, I was really hoping to see an Alabama team that responded in a way that showed that they're competitors. They want to get better. They don't want the season to end quickly in the SEC or NCAA tournament. And that's what I saw with this Alabama team in Baton Rouge. It was a tough loss in overtime against a really good LSU team who's been outstanding there in Baton Rouge. So for Alabama to play well, I thought play really hard. They defended at a high level. Obviously, they didn't take care of the ball well enough against LSU. LSU, of course, the number one steal rate team in America. And by the way, Texas A&M number 2. So it'll be great to just not play a team that's 1 and 2 in the country in an area that you really struggle in. And Alabama wants to get better in taking care of the ball. And that was hopefully an area that was exposed that they can work on and improve in going into the SEC and NCAA tournament. But I like, from a competitive spirit, the way that the week ended. You never want to end on a loss or 2 losses. But from that standpoint, from an effort toughness standpoint, I like what I saw in Baton Rouge on Saturday.
And the Crimson Tide are trying to learn how to close out games, and this is a group that has been successful, 4-3 so far this season in one-possession games. But what do you think any lessons could be learned from how that game ended in overtime?
Yeah, always, and you can always learn lessons, and that as a competitor is what you try to do. And as a wise man once said, never a waste of failure. And of course, Nick Saban doesn't have many, but when he has, his teams have always responded. And that's true early in the season, obviously, but it's also true throughout the season. There are so many, highs and lows over the course of a basketball season. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And you always want to learn. And as a player, whether you're a senior, whether you're a freshman, you always want to get better every day. You want to get better in practice every day. You want to take lessons learned in games, and hopefully the next time they occur, you get better in those areas. And the thing that I've loved to see with Nate Oats coach teams over his first 3 seasons is his teams have gotten better. They've responded. They've gotten better in areas that have been points of emphasis. And while this team has had its ups and downs, they are, and I think, in a position to where they can get on a run and make some noise in the postseason. And they've proven it over the course of the season that they can play with and beat the best teams in the country. They just have to get more consistent, taking care of the ball, better on the defensive end. And I think there's a sense of urgency, a sense of excitement that this team has going into postseason play that gives me some optimism.
One last note on the LSU game. It was great to see Coach Wimp Sanderson on the trip. Of course, your former coach. Or were you a little earlier to the bus? Did you sit up a little straighter knowing that your old coach was there?
Yeah, always. It was great to have Coach Sanderson there, and really cool that that Nate Oats and Greg Byrne, the administration, they love having Coach Sanderson around. And listen, why wouldn't they? The all-time winningest coach in Alabama history. He is a legend not only of the Alabama basketball program but of the SEC. And hopefully, here in Tampa, the SEC tournament, which they used to call the Wimp Sanderson Invitational, because he went to 9 tournament championships in 11 years. Just an incredible run. Won multiple SEC tournament championships and Sweet 16s. So hopefully, Coach Sanderson being around the players and coaches in the regular season finale, or some of that magic that Wimp had in his coaching career will rub off on this team, and they'll have that similar success going into the postseason.
So for Alabama this season, a team that has been at its best beating teams that were in the Final Four a season ago, at its worst losing to teams that have been in the bottom of the SEC so far this year. For a group that's been searching for consistency, how do you try and find it in a tournament like this, where if you want to be successful, you have to win 4 straight games in 4 straight days?
Well, Coach Oats has talked about this, and I think it's so true specifically for this team. And they are as good as their effort and their focus. And when their effort levels are dialed in, where Coach Oats wants it, and from a scouting report standpoint, when they're locked in on both ends of the floor, we've seen how good they can be. They know how good they can be. And when those areas falter just a little bit, and there's not a lot of room for error when you have the #1 overall strength of schedule in college basketball, and by a wide margin, by the way. So when those areas falter just a little bit, and when I say a little bit, you can play really well, really hard, really locked into the scouting report for 35 minutes and lose because you're playing some of the best teams in college basketball. You got to play 40 minutes. You got to be locked in for 40 minutes from a scouting report standpoint. When you play teams that offensive rebound, you got to really focus in on defensive rebounding, which has been up and down this year. You play a team like Texas A&M, LSU, that are the best in college basketball, the 2 best in creating turnovers. You have to make sure that for 40 minutes you are doing a great job of taking care of the basketball. Easier said than done, but these guys are team first players. They want to win. They're about winning, and they're unselfish, and so they're eager to get better. They know the areas that they need to improve in, and going into the postseason, that's something that they've not only talked about, watched film, and tried to execute on the practice floor, and now it's time to go out on the court. And I think that this team will benefit from having that sense of urgency that comes with the postseason. Everybody knows it's win or go home. Now in the SEC tournament, it's one and done, but you still, in the back of your mind, at least Alabama this year, and they know that they're going into the NCAA tournament regardless of what happens in Tampa. That's not always the case. It's nice to be in that position, but you lose, you go home. You're not going to have a chance to compete and repeat as SEC tournament champions. And then when you get to the NCAA tournament, the one and done scenario is what makes March Madness so special. And I think having that mindset, that sense of urgency and understanding that you can't have any slip ups from an effort from a scouting report standpoint, that this team will be at their best in the postseason.
Any reaction to the SEC awards we saw handed out earlier in the week for the Crimson Tide? Jaden Shackleford is 2nd team All-SEC. Then on the All-Freshman team, you have Charles Bediako, J.D. Davison. Then on the defensive team, Keon Ellis.
Yeah, I was really happy for all those guys, and I thought they were all well-deserving. I mean, J.D. and Charles, 2 of the best young players in the SEC. And if you're one of the best 2 young players in the SEC, that means you're 2 of the best young players in college basketball. And I think as Alabama fans, we've known that, and it's good that they're getting that recognition. Keon Ellis, one of the best 2-way players in college basketball, was glad that he got recognized. Jaden Shackleford has had a terrific year on both ends of the floor. The only disappointment for me is I thought Juwan Quinterly deserved to be on the All-SEC team. And listen, I thought they got a lot right, but they missed that one. JQ is certainly deserving of being mentioned as an all-SEC performer. And, this is his time of year. He was the SEC tournament MVP last year when Alabama cut the nets down in Nashville. So I would expect maybe JQ to use that as motivation. And JQ, all these guys, they're not nearly as interested in individual awards or individual success as they are with their team goals. But I think that Javon Quinterly can use that as motivation to play better on both ends of the floor and hopefully lead this team to several wins here in Tampa.
And speaking of being in Tampa for the SEC tournament, how wide open does this tournament feel to you? Because Auburn wins the regular season, but it wasn't like they were head and shoulders above the rest. You look at the top tier of the SEC, the top 6 teams really beat up on each other all throughout the course of the season. So with that in mind, we know the SEC is good this year, but does it feel like kind of a wide open tournament as we start these games in Tampa?
Yeah, it really does, especially the top half. Of the league is as good as I've ever seen it, and I've been around it a long time. And when you look at the top 4 seeds, Auburn right now they are the number 1 seed and won the league outright. But when you look at Kentucky and Alabama, of course, if fortunate enough to win the first game, would have a chance to play Kentucky. They may be the best team in the country when they're healthy. Now they've had a tougher schedule in the SEC than Auburn. They had injuries that I thought cost them some games. They didn't have a chance to have Auburn come back to Rupp Arena. They played there. We're up 9 when Ty Washington got hurt. Ended up losing that game. So who knows how that game would have ended? But we've all seen everybody in the SEC, and it's hard for me to pick one or the other. But right now, I think Kentucky might be maybe the second, third best team in the country. And then, of course, Tennessee is playing at a high level. They finished the season very strong. Arkansas, one of the hottest teams in college basketball. And then, you throw in LSU and Alabama as teams that right now are projected to be 5 seeds in the NCAA tournament. So this league has teams that are capable, obviously, of making a run here in Tampa, but you can make the argument that nobody has the teams that have potential to make a Final Four run like the SEC, which is going to make this weekend in Tampa a whole lot of fun, and then on to the NCAA tournament. The league is in as good a shape as I've seen it in many years, many decades, to be honest. It's just incredible. So anybody can win it, whoever gets hot. It's going to be highly competitive and a whole lot of fun.
Well, we look forward to it. Alabama starts play on Thursday night. We look forward to listening to you, Chris, and Tom give us all the coverage from Tampa. But, Bryan, until then, just enjoy yourself. Don't get sunburned too long on the beach because you're going to be very busy over the next few weeks. But thank you for joining us today. Roll Tide.
I appreciate you having me. Roll Tide.
Yeah, hopefully Brian Passink stays away from the beach and gets to work. Alabama's going to have a very busy stretch coming up. Hopefully a long stay in Tampa, Florida for the SEC tournament. Speaking of being busy, the Alabama softball team has already played 20 games so far this season, and the Crimson Tide are off to a perfect 20-0 start. That included some wins over the weekend against Texas as well as Miami of Ohio, and we were able to have a booth cam available here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network Facebook page for the Texas games with Tom Canterbury on the mic. Now let's take a look back at some of the best moments from the weekend as Alabama improved to 20-0.
Here comes the first pitch. Shipman lines this one in the right center field gap, and that's going to get all the way to the wall. Rounding second is Goodnight. Now she rounds third. Here she comes. No throw, and that's an RBI double for Allie Shipman. And Alabama adds to their lead. It's now 4-2 Crimson Tide. Here comes a 3-1 to Bloodworth. That's a fly ball to deep left field. Way back. Way gone. Megan Bloodworth breaks that tie for home runs for the Alabama team with a solo shot here in the bottom of the sixth. It's 5-4 Crimson Tide. The 2-1. That's a high chopper to short. Dowling has it, makes the throw in time, and that will do it. Your final score, Alabama 5, Texas 4. The Longhorns in the 7th go 3 up and 3 down. Back to a sold-out road stadium as we get you set for game number 2 for the Alabama Crimson Tide here in the T-Mobile Crimson Classic. Alabama taking on the Texas Longhorns for the second time this weekend. That one's lined to left, and it's going to be caught. A diving catch by Jenna Johnson. Likely sealing a run away from the Longhorns, and Alabama is out of it here in the top of the third inning. That was a sinking line drive to left. Off the bat, I didn't think Jenna had a chance to catch up with that one, but she laid out, made the diving catch, and keeps the Longhorns off the board here in the third. And that's a ground ball to short. Sliding in safely is Johnson on the RBI ground out. Washington had it through to first. That was her only play, but Alabama ties it up here in the bottom of the third. As the Tide's RBI leader adds another one. Allie Shipman now with 24. The Crimson Tide leads it, or excuse me, the Crimson Tide has tied it up at 1 here in the bottom of the third. Prangy bunts at this one. They'll throw down, and coming in to score is Goodnight as Tao is caught in a rundown. The ball bounces away, and Tao is on second. Washington did what you are taught to do, and that's run at a runner caught in a pickle. And when she attempted to tag Tao, the ball popped out of her glove. And Alabama steals a run literally here in the bottom of the third inning to take a 2-1 lead. Ground ball to short. Nice play by Dowling, moving to her left. She spins, she throws, she gets the out, and there's one down. Here comes another 2-2. Swing and a miss, strike three. Fouts gets her on strikes, and Texas leads the bases loaded here in the top of the sixth inning as Montana Fouts gets 3 strikeouts in the inning and leaves 3 Longhorn runners on the base paths. Here comes the payoff pitch. Grill with a ground ball to first. They will apply the tag, but coming in to score is Prangy, and Alabama scores another one here in the bottom of the sixth. It's now 3-1 Crimson Tide. First pitch. It's a fly ball to deep right. Grill is on the run. She will make the catch on the warning track, and that will do it as Whitaker gave it a ride opposite field, but did not quite get enough, and Alabama wins it by a final score of 3-1.
Fun time in the booth with Tom Canterbury as he and Gray Robertson team up for most of our games on the radio. Of course, Gray was on the television side this past weekend. Now those two will be reunited coming up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana this weekend for Alabama against LSU and the start of a 3-game series to begin SEC play. And every month here on Crimson Drive, we'll be checking in with Tom and Gray to get their thoughts on the Alabama Crimson Tide softball team. They also host a weekly podcast, Out of the Box podcast, talking all things Crimson Tide softball. But it's a great time to have them back on Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota, to tell us where things stand. Alabama's off to a 20-0 start, but now conference play begins this weekend. Here's Tom Canterbury and Gray Robertson.
Thanks so much, Roger. Tom Canterbury here alongside of Gray Robertson as we are talking about some Alabama softball. As Gray, we are somehow already into conference play. It's happened so quickly, a month in, and it's time to go to LSU and start off SEC play.
How did we get to this point? Didn't we just do a video before Tucson? The season just flies by. Like every year, I'm shocked at how quickly it goes.
It really does. And we had a great weekend this past weekend at the T-Mobile Crimson Classic. Alabama getting 4 wins, running their overall record to 20-0 to start off the season. And we're not quite into the all-time great starts list yet. But if things go really well in the next week or so, then we can start talking about it. But 20-0 is a great way to get started. 2 wins over Texas, 2 more over Miami, Ohio. And you want to take a look at what happened on Saturday when Alabama beat Texas and then Miami, Ohio, when the Tide beat two pitchers that were the conference pitcher of the year last year in the conferences that they competed in. Alabama, it was a grinded out type of day, but got 2 really good wins.
Yes, I totally agree. Haley Dulcini and Courtney Vierstra were last year 2 of the best, quote unquote, mid-major arms you could find anywhere in the country. Haley Dulcini at Fresno State, Vierstra at Miami of Ohio. They, like you said, both won their Conference Pitchers of the Year awards. And we knew coming in that it would be a challenge. It would be difficult. And Alabama has proven now that they can win those games too. We've seen them blow out ranked teams. We've seen them batter teams with the long ball. But this past weekend, at least until Sunday, it was about execution, about laying down good bunts, about just putting it in play, fighting long at-bats, And like you said, it was gritty. And now that we know Alabama can win games like that, I feel very confident about what this team can do going forward, because you're only going to see pretty much the rest of the year pitchers who have been either first team all conference or pitcher of the year or an All-American at some level. I mean, everybody's good. So now we know how Alabama can win against those type pitchers.
You talked about being on base all the time, and a couple of players for the Crimson Tide that certainly have done that all year long, and especially this past weekend. Dallas Goodnight and Kaylee Tao, who both extended on base streaks into the teens.
Yes, Dallas Goodnight had a 8 straight plate appearance streak of reaching base, which is crazy in a sport of failure. She can do it all. She can draw the walks. She can lay down a bunt. She can slap to the shortstop and just beat it out with her speed. She can hit for power. It's been so impressive. And then what I like about what Kaylee Tao's doing is she is reaching despite not getting very many hits. I mean, she only had 1 hit this weekend, but she extended that on base streak because she was patient. She wasn't trying to force it. She knows the hits will come. And so again, we're seeing it come from everywhere in the order, kind of like we thought we would this year, but it's coming in a variety of different ways, which is what, again, makes this team really exciting.
We can't go a Crimson Drive without talking about Montana Fouts, nor should we. Montana Fouts had to do the yeoman's work this past weekend because Lexi Kilfoyle was out with an injury that we hope is going to be very, very short time. Hopefully she's going to be available actually this weekend in Baton Rouge. But Montana, 4 games, 4 W's. She got a couple of starts and then came in relief to get a couple other wins. Just an outstanding performance by Montana.
Yes, and let's keep in mind that's 4 games, 4 wins against 2 teams. So both teams saw her a second time, and it didn't help, which really says a lot about her talent and her adjustments, because she looked so good the second game against Texas. Why? Because she started focusing in more on movement and not just on pace. When it was just on pace in game 1 against Texas, the Longhorns were getting really good contact. When they squared it up, those balls went, man. I mean, they disappeared from view. But she started getting that movement rolling the second time around. She was really effective in that game. And then against Miami, still a couple big shots given up here and there, but overall she did what she's supposed to do against a team out of the MAC. No offense to Miami, but Montana is supposed to run through those games. So just again, continuing her historic pace, not just in Alabama history, but maybe college softball history. We're a little while away from talking about the Jenny Finch record, but it's possible if she can keep up what she's doing going forward.
Yeah, that first game against Texas on Friday, the only time this season that she has given up multiple runs in a start, and Alabama found a way to win. So good that the Tide can even do that when Montana's not having her A game. But even her B+ game is pretty dang good. So
I'll take her C or D- game, whatever. She's good. Right. It doesn't matter.
So Alabama next up, the Tide goes to Baton Rouge to face LSU in a 3-game series to open up conference play. 2 teams that were projected to be toward the top of the league and being contenders definitely for the league championship. So a huge series to start things off. LSU a little bit up and down in the pre-conference as opposed to Alabama, who's undefeated.
Well put. No, yes. I think the LSU thing, it's very interesting because I can't quite pinpoint why they've lost some of the games, because if you look at the pitching, the numbers are solid. There are just these weird games where mistakes are made, where they have some errors that allow some unearned runs to come in, and they just kind of all happen at once. Or Allie Kilponen will have 1 inning where she gives up 3 runs, but because they're not hitting for some reason, that's the difference against the Central Arkansas or something like that. It's just very odd how LSU season has played out, but that does not take away the possible danger. When you've got pitchers who are as experienced as a Kilponen, as a Shelby Sinceri, as a Shelby Wickersham as well, and talented bats like Sierra Briggs and Danica Coffey and Taylor Pleasance, like threats are all over the place. So you can't just roll in and say, hey, we swept them last time, we can do it again. Yeah, you can, but they're not going to go down without a fight. This is a tough LSU team who has always typically started off conference play very, very well.
Yeah, so Alabama's going to have to play at a very high level to go in and get a series victory in Baton Rouge. And then just looking ahead a little bit after that, the Tide goes to Hattiesburg to play Southern Miss on Tuesday, a Southern Miss team that upset Florida a couple weeks ago. And then on Wednesday next week, It's Alabama against the national runner-up from last year, the team that eliminated the Crimson Tide from the Women's College World Series. Florida State coming to Tuscaloosa for a single game Wednesday night, and one of, if not the biggest non-conference single games in Road Stadium history.
So we've talked about this, and I'll just talk about it again now publicly. I think this is the biggest single game ever at Rhodes in the non-conference regular season, that is, because if you look through history, all the other ones that have been really, important with top 10 matchups, top 5 matchups, they've usually played twice. This is the only time it is one. You get one shot, one chance to beat each other. And that is what makes this such a tantalizing matchup. It's at night on a Wednesday, which is crazy. No Wednesday game has ever been bigger in Alabama history. That I would pretty much guess is accurate. And, it's a chance to really show where you are on the national scale, because the non-conference wins have been great, but you haven't faced anybody in that upper echelon yet. You haven't faced a UCLA, an Oklahoma State, or a Florida State. Those are some of the teams like Washington as well that we think could be in OKC. Florida State is a definite World Series team, and Alabama has a chance at home to right some wrongs from the last couple of years and make a big statement on national television in front of a packed crowd. Can you tell I'm excited?
Yes.
I'm so pumped. This is the game that when the schedule comes out, you say that is the one I can't wait for.
So come on out to Rhodes. It's going to be a great atmosphere on Wednesday when the Tide plays Florida State. And then the next weekend, Alabama opens up conference play with a 3-game series, or home schedule of their conference play, taking on Kentucky for a 3-game series here in Tuscaloosa. So a huge couple of weeks for Alabama softball. And we're really looking forward to it. You can always hear all the broadcasts right here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network in Tuscaloosa over the air on 97.5 FM, nick975.com, and the MeTV 975 app. Download that, and you could get all those games. We're going to be on the Varsity app coming up in April, but until then, those are your ways that you can hear Alabama softball over the radio. And Gray, like I said, it's going to be just a monumentous couple weeks here for Alabama softball.
Not just in terms of the games that are being played, but the amount. There's so much happening in these next 2 weeks, and not just on the field. We get a day trip in New Orleans. I mean, what a fun couple weeks with Alabama softball this will be. And I just hope y'all enjoy and buckle up, because it is going to be quite the ride for this team through the month of March.
So that's Gray Robertson. I'm Tom Canterbury. We'll talk to you the first time Friday night at 6 o'clock is going to be the first pitch, 5:50 the airtime for Alabama and LSU. Get all the schedules at rolltide.com, and there's a listen live link there as well. So all one-stop shop, just hit the button and you can listen to us at any point. Back to you, Roger.
Tom and Gray with the softball report. Appreciate those guys. Hope they have fun coming up in Louisiana as Alabama starts a 3-game set, and SEC play with the LSU Tigers this weekend. That's only part of what's coming up on the network as we take a look at our CTSN schedule. Of course, later tonight, it will be Alabama men's basketball playing in the SEC tournament. And our radio coverage coming to you at 6 p.m. Central, a tip-off at 7 p.m. Central or 7:30, right around there. So we got a very busy night of men's basketball ahead later this evening. And even though we only put the one men's basketball game for tonight, do expect games coming up Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as Alabama continues to advance. But then the rest of the schedule looks like this for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The softball time, 6 p.m. on both Saturday and Friday as well, and then Sunday at 2 o'clock. The baseball team just announced as we were on this show today that tomorrow's first pitch against Binghamton has been moved up, and coming up it will be Alabama against Binghamton coming your way at 2 p.m. Central tomorrow. Lee Tracy will cover our radio coverage for you for the next 3 days from Sewell Thomas Stadium. Again, 2 o'clock on Friday, a change from 6 p.m. with some inclement weather forecast for Tuscaloosa. And then don't forget, Monday, the new week will begin with another edition of Hey Coach. We will know where the Crimson Tide men's and women's basketball teams are headed for the postseason at that point, so it should be a fun edition of Hey Coach, kicking off our new week coming up next week. But for this week, that's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Make sure you check them out online at TuscaloosaToyota.com. Special thanks to Tom Canterbury, Gray Robertson for their excellent softball report. Thanks as well to Bryan Passink for giving us a detailed breakdown on the Crimson Tide men's basketball team as they get ready for Vanderbilt tonight in the SEC tournament, and hopefully a very long stay at the tournament in Tampa, Florida. Thanks as well to our producer, Ethan Carabin, for putting this entire show together. Thanks to all of you for watching. This has been Roger Hoover. Thanks again for watching Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Now get out there and enjoy some Crimson Tide sports this weekend. Roll Tide, everyone.